Bofuri Season 2 is officially here, and what an episode. Not only was it Christmas themed, within a single episode our girl Maple was able to not only make the game developers' lives just hell once again, she also was able to be this adorable bundle of energy that we've come to expect, with honestly more action in this 20 or so minutes than I think a lot of shows have in their first few episodes, and all of it was actually pretty unique and interesting. I mean, the episode did have a pre-air, it dropped, and you've probably seen some subs floating around, maybe you've watched them, maybe you've heard bad things. I skimmed them, and honestly, they were the most memeiest of subs. Like, it just felt like some dude didn't even use Google Translate, he just actively tried to make them as worse as possible, and that's why I waited, and I'm glad I did, because this was a quality return, and in a lot of ways, it kind of feels to me, and I'm not sure if I'm the only one feeling it, but lately with anime, there's a lot less recaps into new seasons. Instead, they just throw you right back into the thick of it, and I'm actually kind of enjoying that, because this is episode 13, all things considered, and it almost feels like if Bofuri was a 2-core season, and maybe had a week break, we would have just jumped into this episode. There's no, like, reminding you of what happened in season 1, there's no refresh, it's just Bofuri's world carries on, and it made for a really enjoyable episode because of it. Now, I do got a full live reaction to today's episode available on my Patreon, so if you want to see that, consider supporting, but let's talk about Bofuri Season 2, Episode 1, because this was a Christmas-ish themed episode. Like, it was definitely very festive at the very end, but for the most part, you're not going to look at this episode and say it feels Christmassy, but when you have a world as interesting as New World Online, where there's all these different environments that are so captivating, they're so beautiful, they're so immersive, right? A good MMO RPG is going to make its world feel like there's different identities and cultures sprinkled throughout. And when I'm looking at a show like this, from the soccer petals to the molten lava areas to all these numerous locations, it just feels like a video game you want to play, and that was my biggest praise about the first season, is that Bofuri is the video game we all want to play. If technology was actually to this degree where we could put on a VR headset and we could interact with this world, how many people, like, look at the whole cat area as an example, like this room where you have someone who you wouldn't expect to be that soft go in and is basically petting and just having fun with this like cat-like fluff ball. How many people would probably buy a VR headset to go into a world specifically to interact with that? This type of world is immersive, but it's the level of depth, the realism, the touch, the smell, the sensation, and the excitement of something not feeling like we're trapping these characters to hurt them, but rather they can log out, go have a normal life, come back in and enjoy this. And to me, to return to this world with this Christmas event, which it was basically like 2 days for them, and we end it in this episode, doesn't really feel that fast paced. We had about 3 or 4 interesting action moments that all felt rather distinct. There was humorous moments, there was little flirtatious moments, it just felt like everything Bofuri that reminded me of why I liked the first season, but in this episode all in one, and it was a great return, man. It was beautiful to look at. I still think Bofuri has some of the strongest art direction when it comes to landscapes and just the general, like the soccer petals or just like the way they light things up. It is such a gorgeous show, but like the animation is smooth. So you have like a fight at the end where our girl's basically a xenomorph and we're fighting a swarm of bees. The first fight in this episode is basically like molten lava area, and I thought it was kind of genius with how like the steam and the heat kind of like cloud it, so if they had to use 3D or anything, it would be easier to blend in with everything happening. There was a duel at one point where they're using barriers, which is really cool. Just overall, there was a lot of variety, and at no point did I look at this episode and say, you can tell they definitely put some more resources into this scene than this one. No, Bofuri was consistent in season 1, and it's consistent so far in season 2. The thing that was always really fun though was looking at a girl who basically maxed out her defense and in return broke a game. And the idea of game development, you have to make it so the vast majority of players will have a challenge but also can progress. But then you have someone like Maple who comes in and she's not even attacking. Like, she's literally at one point in this episode, she's like a giant T-Rex just stomping through the woods, and everything in their way was getting obliterated. And the poor game developers are thinking, what are we supposed to do? Because if we buff it to the point of even she would have trouble, then every other player won't be able to progress at all, and that would ruin the event. So what do? Do we just let her crush everything and make it easy mode and hopefully just give more enemies for the other players? It's a very hard conundrum. And they have a joke in this episode where basically the one of the game developers is like, damn, like working remote is a challenge. And I'm just like, this is fantastic. It is such a good world. And I continue to have people, because I made a video covering season 1, right? And I was still getting comments, literally, I think the last one I got was less than a week ago, people still being like, I love this world and I wish I had more to watch. That is how much this show has impressed over the past few years, that there are still new fans jumping aboard this world because there's not a lot like Bofuri. And now we can finally say, Season 2 is here and Season 2 is worth watching. Don't get it mistaken, there is a lot of worlds. I mean, you can look at the past 2 years of anime. There are tons of fantasy, not even just isekai, though those are honestly more noticeable. There are just straight up fantasy shows with video game menus and video game mechanics, but it's not a video game. And I think, honestly, I wish we would see more of these types of anime pop up, where it literally is characters going into a video game, or hell, I even love it when characters are just staring at a computer screen, but the anime directs it as if they're in the game, right? Because there's a charm about it, because you're not trapping them, you're not saying they're life or death, if they don't escape, they die in the game, they die in reality. No, they go to school, they have their lives, but it's directed in such a fun way that it makes it feel as immersive for the viewer as it does for these characters. And I really wish we'd see a bit more. You might be able to say, well, what's the difference? If we're already having video game menus and this and that and the third, then we already basically have what you're hoping for. But I think when you look at a show like Bofuri and the charm and the atmosphere and just the wish of like, damn, I just wish our VR was to this point. Then, yeah, our VR is getting better and better, but to have it to this level of degree, man, like it's a charm that I wish we saw more of, because typically when we see stuff like this, they also add in more threats and more stakes, which I like seeing those, but honestly, I just hope Bofuri's popularity will just continue to grow, so more production committees will look at stuff like this and say, oh, this is really doing well, let's greenlight all these manga and light novels that have been sitting waiting for their anime adaptation, because now Bofuri has basically kindled the spark and now everyone wants to produce these types of shows. I think my favorite moment might have to be this very basic joke, but it's when our girl Kasumi, she ends up like getting a new sword, right? And the sword's badass, and initially when she transforms, like it just removes her clothes and she gets a little embarrassed, but no one's around, so she fights. And the fact that you can go from being so busty to then just a flat-chested lolly, and the fact that it's like 10-minute like cooldown, and then just our boy comes in and is like, oh, doesn't say too much in that moment, but when they get to the Christmas party there, you have to use your sword, because that new costume would really work well in that child body. I'm like, oh my god. The humor in the show definitely has some funny moments for sure, but it was kind of nice because I was a little worried at first because they were talking of this being a Christmas event, and really, it wasn't Christmas themed. I was kind of thinking, oh, maybe they'll fight like a snowman or something crazy, more festive. But when they went to like open their presents, it kind of just like, it made it perfect. To me, this was an amazing episode, but if they didn't at least give me a Santa hat, I'm not gonna lie, I might have knocked it down just a slight peg because you said it was a Christmas themed. But seeing them all dressed up, seeing her as Rudolph, I mean, what character is more deserving of the rare reindeer costume than Maple? I mean, Maple's the only one for it, but this was a great return. It was fun, it was charming. It was, you know, just everything I think you probably liked about Bofuri all in one episode, and the fact that they just throw you right back into the thick of it, they don't recap, they don't refresh, they just say Bofuri's a world that you're not going to be forgetting. If you want to be reminded, go rewatch the season, because we're just jumping into this, and I hope more anime will just keep doing that, because I appreciate it. But yeah, I leave this episode with a grin on my face and eager to see more, but thoughts and feelings yourself down below, leave a like if you enjoyed, and hey, subscribe if you're new around here. Like I mentioned, full live reaction is available on my Patreon, and while you're there, you can also get yourself video shoutouts like a few we're about to get here. So we got Josh Fry, Nathan Semichuk, and Snake Eater 7. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care and have a good one.